he's established a momentum. He's not only with Putin, but with the European leaders and with Zelensky. So it now has a time limit. Instead of dragging on and on and on, President Trump does what he does best, which is he's putting, time is money. So he's putting a time limit on it. And the second thing is he seems to be pushing everybody closer together. He's obviously making pressure on the Europeans to say, what are you going to do? If you say you want security guarantees for this Ukraine situation, you want to make sure Putin doesn't reattack, 6 months, 6 years down the road, what are you going to do? What is your contribution to this? He's putting pressure on Zelensky saying, you're going to have to give up some land. And he's also putting pressure on Putin saying, look, there's some preconditions we have to have met. And so I think he pushes everybody in because he's got the ultimate weapon. He's got all the cards, as he likes to say. And the cards are that he could effectively crush the Russian economy with our economic sanctions. He could stop Ukraine in its tracks by stopping the delivery of weapon systems. And he could push the Europeans to the point where they're friendless. So he's got all the cards to play, and he's playing them, and he's playing tough.
All right, guys, good Tuesday to you. What a set of meetings yesterday. I got to just say, hats off to the White House advance team. That meeting in Alaska was brilliant, perfectly orchestrated, and it didn't just happen. Like, those things take months, and he had days. And then to have Zelensky come and 7 of those other European leaders and meeting after meeting, luncheon, bilats, presser, like, I know we start to sometimes take this for granted, but it didn't just happen. It was unbelievable. Dan Scavino, my old colleague and good friend, showing some behind the scenes of President Trump and the team going out. There's Monica Crowley, the protocol ambassador, former colleague of mine as well from the campaign, getting everyone ready. It was pretty cool. Marco Rubio going out, though, and laying it all out. Here's what this is all about, according to Secretary Rubio. Take a listen.
Any sovereign country in the world has a right to enter into security alliances with other countries. It's not just NATO. We have such alliances with South Korea. We have it with Japan. Other countries have it with each other. And so I think everyone would acknowledge, including, by the way, for the first time, the Russian side, under President Trump's sort of pressure or, a suggestion, is that, in fact, a Ukraine post-conflict has a right to enter into security agreements with other countries. And we will work with our European allies and non-European countries, by the way, to build such a security guarantee. We're working on that right now. We'll continue to work on that. And that'll be something that'll have to be in place after a peace deal, so that Ukraine can feel safe moving forward. And we're coordinating that as we speak. We're involved in the coordination of it. So, yeah, there are a number of countries that are willing to step forward and provide Ukraine security guarantees. But as the Ukrainians have said to us, and I think have said publicly, the strongest security guarantee they can come up with their future is to have a strong military moving forward. And that's the other dynamic that's changed. We're no longer giving Ukraine weapons. We're no longer giving Ukraine money. We are now selling them weapons, and European countries are paying for it through NATO. They are using NATO to buy the weapons and transfer them to Ukraine. That's another big change from the way this war was approached just just under the Biden administration, for example.
Yeah, a big change. We're actually allowing U.S. companies to make money off this. Instead of us footing the bill, which we've done forever, we basically said, hey, I tell you what, we'll let you buy our weapons. We make money. You guys get the weapons. Ukraine gets defended. Wow. How come no one ever thought of that construct before? It's amazing, all these guys who love to Monday morning quarterback Donald Trump. If you've learned one thing in the first 200 days, don't bet against Trump. He's the only one who can do these things. And in so many times, the president said this, so I don't feel bad saying it. But in so many things, they're not partisan issues. It's common sense. Why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you ask for this? Why wouldn't you cut this deal? It's like there's days when I want to give him so much credit and I realize he's right. And that's why I'm saying he uses the word, so I can't. But it's common sense. Secretary Rubio continued and talked about why this is unique to Donald Trump, though. Take a look.
President Trump is the only leader in the world, acknowledged by all the Europeans, the only leader in the world that can talk to both of them and bring them both to a meeting is Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States. He's the only one. And the fact that he's willing to do it is something that every American, including Democrats, should be happy that we have a peace president. We should be proud that we have a president that's made peace a priority in his administration.
Okay. Well, you're saying to me, Sean, that's Marco Rubio. He works for Donald Trump. He's the Secretary of State. Of course he's going to say this. But I want to play you what the Secretary General of NATO had to say, because he doesn't work for Donald Trump. In fact, he works for a bunch of NATO countries. What did he think about this? Take a look.
The conversation was a conversation among friends, among close allies who respect each other, who like each other, who know each other very well, discussing how we can bring this terrible war to an end. And this is a goal we all have in common. And without President Trump, this deadlock with Putin would not have been broken. He was the only one who could do that starting in February.
The only one who could do it. That's the Secretary General of NATO. There's one more thing that he said that I want to play for you guys, though. Because, and I'm going to bring this up with KT McFarland when I talk to her about this, because we heard about it during the first term. Trump hates NATO. He's trying to blow up NATO. Will he agree to Article 5? He's so horrible on NATO. Was he? Or was he just actually asking NATO to do what they agreed to? Because there's two parts of this Article 5 in the NATO agreement. Yeah, we'll have your back. An attack on one is an attack on all. But we also agreed that we would all pay up into our own national defenses. And we gave Europe a free ride. This is the Secretary General, though, on Donald Trump's criticism of NATO. Take a listen.
Mr. Secretary General, I want you to take us, if you would, our viewers across the country, into the room with Donald Trump when the cameras were pulled back and it was just all of you. What was he like? What is his conversational tone like with you? Because for years, we've heard about, he wants to ruin NATO. He wants to break up NATO. He's a great disruptor. He doesn't know what he's doing. Tell us what he's like behind closed doors.
Well, he was amazing, and he is amazing. And let me tell you this, that his criticism of NATO was right. What he was saying is that the U.S. is spending so much more on its defense and therefore spending on the collective defense of NATO territory than the Europeans. And the great thing is, and I think this is, and I hope the Americans see this, probably one of his biggest foreign policy successes of his president, of Trump 47.
All right. If you're a big fan of NATO and you've been critical of President Trump, there's your NATO secretary telling you that it is a better, stronger organization because of Trump, and his criticism was fair. Just saying. Anyway, KT McFarland, Trump's former deputy national security advisor, is about to join me later this week. We're going to have a fantastic panel. Dr. Peter McCullough of the Wellness Group is going to give us a MAHA update on Wednesday. And as I said, you see all these companies doing stuff, canceling red dyes, ultra plastic foods, all this kind of stuff because of the MAHA movement, because of Bobby Kennedy and the MAHA movement. I'm going to get a big deal for that. Again, by the way, thank you for everybody that's been going to Apple and Spotify, even if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble or X. It's super helpful just to go into your phone, hit that podcast button, search for The Sean Spicer Show, and just give us a 5-star review, because it's important to show growth. But anyway, before I get to KT, you guys know this. I've been saying this forever. I love ending my night with Beam's Dream Powder. I get all fired up during the day, but if you don't get a good night's sleep, it doesn't matter. I got to get up. I got to do the morning meeting. I got to do all this stuff. So I need to get a good night's sleep. I have been for the last year taking Beam's Dream Powder. I had taken pills of all sorts in the past, melatonin, magnesium, you name it. I've tried it, but this is like the most delicious blend of everything. And I'm not kidding. I told you guys, I love the cocoa cinnamon one. I've had the brownie, the peppermint. All the flavors are amazing. You get to pick your own. I take a 1 scoop of it, put it in some water, microwave for 30 seconds. Some people tell me they use milk. Some people tell me they don't heat it up. When I was out at sea doing Navy duty, I couldn't heat it up, so I just put it in water. It tastes great too. But it's all these natural ingredients: reishi, apigenin, L-theanine, magnesium, melatonin, all in a great thing. You fall asleep, you stay asleep, and you wake up feeling refreshed. It's amazing. And right now, Beam is giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount, up to 40% off. If you go to shopbeam.com/Spicer and use code word Spicer, you can save on any of those flavors or all of them. I really don't care. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer and use code word Spicer to get 40% off. By the way, once you wake up, if you are hungry and looking for a great snack that's MAHA approved, Masa Chips, baby. I love these things. I was in the car for a while yesterday. You know what I had? A bag of Masa Chips right next to me for the whole car ride. I'm a snacker. I admit it. So it's like you're always going, what can I have? And sometimes I don't want carrots. But these chips are so amazing. Up until the 1990s, most chips were actually cooked in tallow, and then everyone went nuts with seed oils, and they're all processed foods. It's so not good for you. Masa Chips, though, there are no seed oils. It is just 3 ingredients: naturalized corn, sea salt, and grass-fed tallow. 3 ingredients. These chips are amazing. They're crunchier, they're tastier, sturdier than other chips. If you're a dipper, like you like guac or salsa or queso, I'm not sure the queso is that probably good for you though. You're going to love Masa Chips. They are amazing and they are beloved by thousands of people. I met the owners at a Maha event, total Maha approved. Go to masachips.com/Sean, SEAN for 25% off your first order. That's masachips.com/Sean. I would try the variety pack, by the way. That's what I did. It's got lime, habanero, the blue. They're all amazing. My son loves the habanero. I am a big fan of the lime, but trust me when I tell you, 25% off your first order if you go to masachips.com/Sean for your first order, and it's SEAN. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in KT McFarland. KT, great to see you. Thanks for joining the show again.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Sean, whether it's in the West Wing of the White House or it's over the airwaves.
Although in person is a little bit more enjoyable.
Yeah.
But since we don't have the luxury of that West Wing badge anymore, we get to play analyst here. I want you to just put your hat back on as Deputy National Security Advisor. If at the end of the day yesterday, President Trump turned to you, as he so often did, and said, KT, how do you think it went? What would you have said to him?
Oh, I think it was terrific. For a couple of reasons. One, he's established a momentum. He's not only with Putin, but with the European leaders and with Zelensky. So it now has a time limit. Instead of dragging on and on and on, President Trump does what he does best, which is he's putting, time is money. So he's putting a time limit on it. And the second thing is he seems to be pushing everybody closer together. He's obviously making pressure on the Europeans to say, what are you going to do? If you say you want security guarantees for this Ukraine situation, you want to make sure Putin doesn't reattack, 6 months, 6 years down the road, what are you going to do? What is your contribution to this? He's putting pressure on Zelensky saying, you're going to have to give up some land. And he's also putting pressure on Putin saying, look, there's some preconditions we have to have met. And so I think he pushes everybody in because he's got the ultimate weapon. He's got all the cards, as he likes to say. And the cards are that he could effectively crush the Russian economy with our economic sanctions. He could stop Ukraine in its tracks by stopping the delivery of weapon systems. And he could push the Europeans to the point where they're friendless. So he's got all the cards to play, and he's playing them, and he's playing tough.
What I don't get, I feel like there's a missing piece of the puzzle. I wrote a column today at SeanSpicer.com, and the opening line is, if we've learned anything in 200 days of Trump 2.0, it's don't bet against Donald Trump. And so I always put that now at the front. Don't bet against Trump, right? I just need him to give me Powerball tickets because I think it's like $600 million tonight. But I also go, okay, I just don't get why Putin wants a deal or can be trusted. So answer the second part for me.
Can't be trusted. No chance he's trusted. So you have to make it ironclad so that he has, that he can't do what he wants to do. And the way to do that is by constricting his money. Russia survives. Russia pays for everything in its economy by oil export prices, oil and natural gas. It exports and makes a lot of money. That pays for their whole government. It pays for their national security. It pays for the war in Ukraine. So take away the ability for Russia to make that money, and Russia can't fight on. The other way you impose a constraint on Putin is to show that there is a united Europe and a united United States, maybe not in the sense of NATO membership for Ukraine, but that there would be some form of security guarantee so that Russia knows if it's 6 years from now decides, okay, looks good, I'm going to go back in and grab the rest of Ukraine, that it would be met with serious military consequences.
All right, let me take those in order. Actually, I'm going to take them in reverse order because I think it's easier. On the Europe thing, does he Putin fear Europe's military response? Like, in other words, if they say we're putting peacekeeping troops on the ground there on the border, French, Europe, maybe Germany, does he care? Does he look at that and say, all right, I got to be careful here? Or does he say, I'll blow it over?
Well, it depends on what position he's in economically and what position the Europeans are in. But yes, he fears that. One of the things that he's always said is Ukraine cannot have NATO membership. Why? Because he might be able to pick on Ukraine, but he can't pick on NATO.
But is that really a proxy for he just worries about us? Like, in other words, I think that's you're right about NATO, but he realizes that NATO means, i.e. proxy, is the United States. An attack on Belgium is an attack on the United States. If it's France and England that have their troops, does he fear that I get your point, but that's where I think the distinction matters, KT.
It does matter.
So that if he doesn't think the U.S. is going to come in, does he actually fear Europe's might militarily?
You mean Europe versus Russia? Combined?
Right, in other words, so let's just say hypothetically that the deal is that I get all this land, but there's going to be a peacekeeping force made up of, let's just for the sake of argument, it's going to be the UK military and the French army. Like, those are going to be the peace. Does he look at that and say, okay, I got to be careful. Like, I can't go do anything aggressively because they'll come after me? Or does he go, if the U.S. isn't part of that deal, then that's a paper tiger?
But he wouldn't know. I mean, it's a tripwire, right? If so, Putin comes back in and he starts killing Belgians and French and British, would the United States get involved? He can't know that the United States would not get involved. So I think it's a deterrent. The tripwire is a deterrent. And again, a lot of it is so much of calculation. Putin did not think Ukraine would be this hard. If he knew that Ukraine was going to be this hard, maybe he would have done it differently. Maybe he would have done it not at all. But he's now got to look at a very changed calculation. And it's not just Putin himself. It's all the cronies around Putin. When Putin came to meet with President Trump a few days ago in Alaska, he didn't just bring the foreign minister and the economics minister. He brought Russian businessmen. So he's got a constituency too. He's a dictator. And he calls all the shots, but he's got a constituency that he has to make happy. And that constituency may at some point say, hey, Putin, I signed up for a bigger, greater Russia, but I didn't sign up for war with potentially all of Europe and potentially the United States. And the other thing is that maybe Putin looks at this and says, well, I don't really care about the Russian. I'm Russia. I don't really care about the French military. They're nothing much. But what he has to fear is the economic power that the United States could impose on him. So it's not just that the United States would go to war with America. That he doesn't want, but that he would go to economic war with America. So there are three things that we could do to really crush their economy. Number one is to enforce sanctions so that Russia cannot sell oil and natural gas. Now, that's the sanction there, but nobody's really paying attention to it. China's buying Russian oil. Turkey's buying Russian natural gas. The Netherlands are buying Russian oil. So President Trump could go to all those countries, and he has gone to India, and say, look, you choose. You want to buy Russian energy? Fine, but you don't have access to the American market. You cannot sell your goods in America. And everybody knows that crushes their economies. So when President Trump says, not only don't buy Russian, but then he offers an alternative. Why don't you buy American energy? It's cleaner, safer, better, faster, reliable. That gives them an alternative. So that's how he could crush the Russian economy, by depriving it of money. The other way he could crush the Russian economy is we control what's called the SWIFT system. It's the international banking system. So in other words, if Russia wants to sell oil to India, they have to clear the check at some bank. And it's an American bank which controls the clearance process. So we could shut them out. We could say, Russia, no thanks. You're not going to check. You're not going to receive or pay through an American bank. So they're out of the international banking system. And then there's a third thing, which is that Russians have what was called a rainy day fund, about $300 billion, that they sort of saved up for just in case. And those assets have been frozen. The Europeans want to have access to them, unfreeze them, but to give them to Ukraine. So all three of those things would be devastating to the Russian economy. So they've got it in their calculation. It's not just, are we willing to go to war with maybe some European countries, maybe even America, or are we also willing to just really crush our economy?
So on this SWIFT banking thing, it's funny because you said that, and I remember having to transfer money to, I think it was an Australian place, and they were literally like, you need to place this through a SWIFT thing, and I didn't know what that was. So I now actually know what it is. But so is it currently the case that they do transfer this money through the SWIFT, meaning, in other words, we currently do allow it?
There's some restrictions placed on it, and it's one of the reasons that we've not gone sort of full Monty and just completely shut them out is because of the other countries involved. And what you've seen is that other countries have started bartering, where they'll say, well, I'll buy your oil, but I'm not going to pay for it with a check that goes through the SWIFT system in dollars. I'm going to pay for it with, I don't know, potatoes or something. Obviously, that's not a very good or efficient economy. So we have a lot of economic pressure. But the other thing is that, and this is what I so respect President Trump for, he's threading a needle. When we were in the White House, Sean, all he had to do was deal with Russia alone. And he had hoped that he could improve a relationship between the United States and Russia, because then that would leave him free to confront the really big issue, which was China. But the intelligence community and the Democrats and the bureaucracy sabotaged any ability President Trump had to do a regularized relationship with Russia. It was Russia, Russia, Russia. You couldn't even talk to the Russians for fear that you were going to be arrested and thrown in jail for treason. So what he now has, though, is President Trump knew he did not want Russia and China to be in an alliance. And they weren't when he was in office in the first term. But thanks to Joe Biden's complete incompetence, you now have a strong Russian-Chinese relationship and alliance. So what President Trump not only has to deal with all the stuff he had to deal with before, but now he's got to deal with a China and Russia together, a Sino-Russo alliance. And those two together with Chinese technology, Chinese money, Russian natural resources, Russian military, that aimed at the United States, at dislodging the United States from a position of power and authority, that's really tough for us. So President Trump has to try to solve Ukraine in the following way. He needs to protect Ukraine, has to keep the Europeans as our friends, but at the same time, he doesn't want to lose Russia. He could solve Ukraine by doing the things you and I've just talked about crushing the Russian economy. What does that do? Crushes the Russian economy and shoves the Russians into the waiting arms of China. He could also make good friendships with Russia at the expense of Ukraine. So he's trying to thread that needle. How can he stop the Ukraine war, keep the Europeans contributing to our common defense, and in fact, increasing their contribution to our common defense, but at the same time, keeping an option open to an improved relationship with Russia?
KT, the through line with Ukraine, Europe, and Russia is energy, it seems. You've got rare earth minerals, oil and gas, this purchase of oil and gas in the EU trade deal. Like, why is energy so crucial to this overall deal coming together?
Energy has always been the critical issue. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 8 years ago, when Donald Trump said to the Europeans, he said to the Germans, do not build Nord Stream 2. Do not get your oil and natural gas from Russia. You might think it's a good deal now. You might think it's a bargain, but they're going to use that as blackmail against you. And if you're so dependent on Russian energy, they could turn the switch on, turn the switch off. You could be shivering and in the dark in the middle of the winter. So buy American, don't buy Russian. Well, they didn't take his advice, of course, and they tried to buy Russia, Russia, Russia. They thought it was going to be great for their economies. Well, it turned out President Trump was right. The Russians have used that as blackmail. So we now offer them an alternative, which is American energy, oil and natural gas. And as you pointed out, in that new EU, European Union, U.S. trade deal, a big part of it was that they would buy American oil and natural gas to wean themselves off of Russia. But they're not completely off. European countries are still buying Russian oil and natural gas. And the way they do it, and, you're a Navy guy, you understand this, they have these big container ships, these tankers, that leave Russia with like Russian lettering on the side, and they're oil tankers. And they go to some third country, maybe it's Turkey, it's even the Netherlands, and they kind of paint over the side of the boat. And they say something, European Energy Company. And then that company sells oil and natural gas to France, to Germany, to other countries. So it's an indirect route of Russia getting its money from the Europeans. So when you think about it, if the Europeans are so mad that the United States needs to do more to help Europe and to save Ukraine, why, Europe, are you guys paying money to Russia that Russia is turning around to use to fight in Ukraine?
How important are the rare earth minerals? I know that previously when we were talking to Ukraine, that was a big thing that Scott Bessent and others talked about. How important is that, either for us to have access to it or to deny Russia?
All right, the rare earth minerals are essential because they're essential for any modern communications. They're essential for any military systems. I mean, we can't do without them, whether it's in your cell phone or in the guidance system, of a cruise missile. You need it. We don't have any. Or we have some, but we don't use it because of environmental concerns. The Russians, they have a little bit, Ukraine has a lot in eastern Ukraine, but the country that dominates the rare earth mineral market is China. They bought it up all over the world, and they're deciding, again, they use blackmail, and they're saying to the U.S., you do what we want, or you're not going to have rare earth minerals. And so one of the things that Donald Trump has realized, and I think this was an eye-opener when he came into office, is, yikes, our military equipment is completely dependent on China's rare earth minerals. We need an alternative source. So why do you think he's looking at Canada? Canada has rare earth minerals.
Yeah.
Greenland has a lot of rare earth minerals. They just haven't been developed yet. And Ukraine has some. So the trade deal, or the deal that we've signed with the United States and Ukraine, was that we, the United States, would help them develop their rare earth mineral business, and we would get right of first refusal. We get first dibs on all of it. That's important to our security. It won't happen in a day. It may not happen in 5 years, but it's important to our security. But it also ties the Ukrainian economy to the American economy. I mean, what better guarantee do you have of security than an American companies are invested in your country? The Russians really are going to crawl, fight their way through American engineers and contract managers and probably lawyers to get to Kyiv? No, they're not going to kill Americans to get to Kyiv. So again, it's another security guarantee. The rare earth minerals are critical. And Sean, I would just remember when we were in the White House and when President Trump started calling the virus that had come out of Wuhan, he called it the China virus. Right. Or he called it flu, most insulting of all. And the Chinese, and President Trump said, well, wait, they call it the Spanish flu. Why don't we call it the Wuhan flu? Why don't we call it the China flu? But the Chinese called President Trump indirectly, not him directly, but to the aides, and said, look, you continue to do this kind of trash talking about China and disrespecting China, we're going to cut off your supply of antibiotics, because they made all the antibiotics and precursors. So it was a demonstration that the Chinese, they're willing to play hardball with people's lives in order to get what they want politically. That's why we have to get off of these dependencies on Chinese essential goods.
That's like a pet peeve of mine. They send us a virus, and then we were like, can we have the PPE and the pharmaceuticals to address the virus that you sent us? It's like literally saying, can I have some water to the guy who set your house on fire? I want to get back to Putin, though, if I can. I guess the name of the game is that, we talked about the trust. I just don't even know that he wants a deal. And I think you're going to see a level of obfuscation that is pretty epic in the next couple of weeks. And he's going to have an issue with the location of the meeting and then whether there was water at the table and how much land. I mean, so if you were a betting person, what would you place the odds that there's actually a deal with Putin?
Oh, I think there'll be a deal.
You do?
Yeah, I think the hard way or the easy way. The easy way is that Russia agrees to a deal of some sort where they get some kind of land. Ukraine doesn't get NATO membership, but maybe it gets some kind of security guarantee from European countries. And then President Trump promises the Russians, if you do a deal on Ukraine, then a lot of good things are going to happen between the United States and Russia. So it's like a carrot and a stick at the same time. Yeah. So I think he'll get the deal. But I do agree with you. Putin's going to try to stall. He's going to try to exploit. It's like trying to negotiate with your 13-year-old. I mean, they're going to think of everything you've not even thought of yet to try to screw up the deal. But at the end of the day, what really makes a difference is what Donald Trump did with Iran. Now, why is that connected? Remember when President Trump said, Iran, you got so many days to give up your nuclear program or else? And, when the 60-day limit had been reached, the Israelis attacked. And then President Trump said, okay, you got, another couple of days to get rid of your nukes. They didn't get rid of their nukes. And President Trump blew away their nuclear weapons with the B-2s. So it's not a coincidence that when President Putin was in Alaska last week, guess what the flyover was? It was the same B-2 bombers that had just destroyed Iran. So what that did, it's a long way of saying that what that got Donald Trump was a lot of credibility. When Donald Trump says something, he means it. So if Donald Trump says to Russia, I'm going to crush your economy, they've got to think 2, 3, 4 times about, do I really want to do the Iran move? Do I really want to risk everything? Because Donald Trump probably means business.
Take me inside that decision, right? So I thought so too. I thought the kids call it a flex, a boss move. when that B-2 flew over, buddy, the thing that was cool to me, the optics, Trump just keeps walking, right? Doot, 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 doot. And all of a sudden you're like, and Putin looks up like, what the heck is that? And it was like, oh, that's what was in Iran. You got it? And I thought it was the total, but just walk us in, take us inside the room for a second. Is it the national security advisor in your office where someone says, hey, you know what would be a total move? Or is that the Secretary of Defense? Who comes up with an idea like that?
Donald Trump.
You think he said, hey, let's get a B-2 to fly over top?
Yeah. I mean, don't you remember, Sean, that we were preparing him for one of his early debates in 2016. And he said, I think I've got an idea. And it was a debate against Hillary. And he said, let's really rally her. Let's get all the women who had accused President Clinton of having, sexual relations with him or whatever. And we're going to have those women sitting in the front row of the Donald Trump hearing section. So when Hillary comes out and she sees all of Bill Clinton's accusers, it's going to put her on her back foot. So President Trump himself, he's a great stage manager. So I think he probably came up with it himself. And then everybody else said, oh, yeah, that'd be kind of cool. And not only that, but just, again, because he comes from a TV background as well as a business background. He had the big, thick, wide red carpet. Putin had the little short, tiny, little red carpet. Donald Trump's a really big guy, he's huge. He's got big shoulders. He's got a big head. And there's little Putin next to him. And then when Donald Trump was walking from the first handshake into the limousine, Donald Trump has big strides. So for every step Donald Trump took, Putin had to take 2. So it looked like a little kid trying to catch up with mom. It was all that stuff. Donald Trump understands it, and he understands the power of that visual image.
So Macron was out talking, I think, either last night or this morning. He talked to Kristen Welker on NBC, and he was a little bit more pessimistic, I would say. But one of the things that he has brought up, and I sort of want to hear your take on this, is once you start agreeing to giving an aggressor land, okay, this isn't a war. Russia invaded them, took their land. I get the history. But from your perspective, there are people that say if you agree to any deal with Ukraine in terms of land that Russia walks away with, that there's then a precedent, whether that's China taking over Taiwan, whatever. We've now said if you are the aggressor, you control land, at some point you're probably going to get rewarded. Fair or not?
Yeah, but what's the alternative? Who's going to enforce it? I mean, that's the whole thing. So the circular argument, I mean, I spent a lot of time the last year before the election going to Eastern European countries and talking to leaders, and they kept saying the whole history, like you just referred to, it's the aggressor, you can't reward the aggressor. I said, well, okay, so who enforces it then? I mean, what happens next? Is your alternative to just keep fighting? Ukraine's losing this war. It's a war of attrition. The country with more money, more staying power, more troops, that guy wins. And now maybe Russia is winning inch by inch. Maybe they take a foot of land a week, but they are ultimately going to win a war of attrition. So with that in mind, what's the alternative? I mean, is Ukraine just going to fight to the last man and they'll all be dead? Because Russia will keep fighting after the last Ukrainian is dead. And so I think you got to start looking for what is an alternative. And the people who make those arguments, those are all good arguments. If you had a sheriff who would arrest the bad guy, but you don't. The United States is not the world's policeman, and the United States is not going to war with Russia over a part of the globe that is not essential to American national security, like, for example, China is essential, the relationship with China. So I get what they're saying, but I live in a cold, hard world of realism. And what's the best you're going to do is to get a kind of an agreement like this. And does Russia get rewarded? Maybe. But then I look past, if Ukraine cannot win the war, no way Ukraine, all the stuff we're giving Ukraine, they're still not winning. They're losing slowly, but losing. Is there a possibility looking beyond a peace agreement? Ukraine can win the peace. Russia doesn't win the peace. Russia could win the war, but it can't win the peace. Here's how Ukraine wins the peace. The deal is done. The fighting stops. $1 trillion, the estimates are $1 trillion, will rush into Ukraine to develop their rare earth minerals, to develop their agricultural resources. They've got a very well-educated population. Plus, a lot of the cities are rubble. So there's a great rebuilding opportunity. So if Ukraine is smart and has a peace agreement, even if it's not the deal they wanted, they have an agreement within 5 years, they could be fully integrated into the European and Western economy. So in other words, Ukraine developing all these resources, having, every investor in the world in Ukraine doing deals. We have an economic interest in having Ukraine succeed. Within a couple of years, Ukraine is fully integrated economically into Europe. They could be as powerful, let's say, as Poland. They could be as strong as Poland. Now, if you're Russia, the job of invading the rest of Ukraine just got a lot harder because all of a sudden you have economic ties to all the European countries. So that's how Ukraine wins the peace. How does Russia deal with the peace agreement? They're bad news. What do they have? They have oil and natural gas they can export. With President Trump's energy policies, those prices are always going to be low. Who's going to rush in to rebuild Moscow? Who's going to invest? And nobody's going to invest in that country. It's a gangster country. So if you look sort of where are Russia and Ukraine right now, look at where they are in 5 years. Ukraine could be a very powerful economic country, and Russia will still be Russia.
Okay, the example I hear coming up more than any is, well, what then if you're China and you're looking at Taiwan and you've talked about reunification, don't you look at this as an example and say, okay, great, we'll be the aggressor. What sheriff is going to stop us?
Could do. But the Chinese historically, if you look at 5,000 years of Chinese history, they're not big risk takers. Now, what they will do, they don't want to go to war. I mean, the whole Sun Tzu theory of the art of war is that you do this, you set the table so that you don't have to go to war. So for the Chinese, they'll do other things. They might have, economic relations with Taiwan factories, for example, or they might use cyber warfare if they wanted to, quote, go to war with Taiwan. They'll do a lot of other things. One of the main things they'll do is to go to the countries that might rush to Taiwan's defense, the United States, Japan, Korea, Philippines, and then start picking them off one by one. There's nothing to stop a bad guy. If there's no sheriff, there's nothing to stop a bad guy from doing what a bad guy wants to do, unless you make the price so high for the bad guy that he's not willing to pay it. Or he'll think maybe things will get better, but I'm not going to do it right now.
One of the things that was shocking to me last night was NATO Secretary Mark Rutte saying very clearly, I played the clip earlier, that Trump was right in his criticism of NATO. You and I were both there in that first term when we went over to that NATO summit. Everyone was like, oh, Trump hates NATO. And my answer was, no, he hates the fact that we have a deal that you're not upholding. You all, member nations, are supposed to be contributing to your own national defense. You're not doing it because you want us to take care of you. I felt like there was a little bit of vindication yesterday by it was like Trump was right.
There is that picture from that first NATO summit where Trump is sitting at the desk. He's got his hands folded and his shoulders bunched up. And then Angela Merkel from Germany is leaning over him, and Macron is there, and Boris Johnson and the Canadian. They're all kind of looking at Trump like, you idiot, don't you know? Why are you asking this of us? I remember being in the Oval Office with the first phone call President Trump had with Chancellor Merkel of Germany. And the first words out of her mouth were, what are you going to do about Ukraine? And he said, well, what are you going to do about Ukraine? It's your neighbor, not my neighbor. Why are you not doing anything about Ukraine? So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of vindication that Trump was right all along. Obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine helped tip the balance. But that invasion would never have happened if they'd all listened to Donald Trump in the first place. I mean, first of all, Russia would not have had the money to do it because oil prices would have remained low. And secondly, there would have been a united NATO. And your argument that we don't want this deal, we don't want an alliance where we're doing all the heavy lifting. In fact, I would go back to the Europeans and say, if you want a really strong NATO, that means everybody has to participate, not just Big Daddy. Everybody has to do their percentage and do their fair share of defense.
That's the Italians. I want to ask you one last question. I get asked this a lot, and I want to get your take on this. What is different between Trump 2.0 than the first term, in your mind?
There are three things that are different. In 1.0, and you know this better than anybody, you had an adversarial press that was very powerful. You had a Democrats in Congress who were very powerful. You also had the intelligence community that was very powerful. And I would say the intelligence community, and I would then say the bureaucracy that was very powerful. So Trump had all those three lined up against him. He had no, he was doing it all by himself. Now, fast forward to 2.0. Well, what's happened to the Democrats, the unity of the great Democrats? Look, it's a bunch of crazy young people and a bunch of 80-year-old guys, right? So there's no Democratic Party with no message. Number two, the media. I mean, one of the reasons that your podcast is doing so well, your show is doing so well, is nobody's looking at CNN and MSNBC and the traditional media. They're looking to alternative media, and conservatives are dominating the conservative media. And then third is the bureaucracy, and I would put the intelligence community at the head of that. Doge made a big difference. That Elon Musk unveiling this crazy stuff we were paying for, all of a sudden the bureaucracy wasn't so powerful. And then having the combination of Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino going after the intelligence communities, and then the intelligence community leaders, all the CIA director, et cetera, declassifying all of those documents where they were planning the destruction of President Trump and just letting it all hang out. There goes the bureaucracy. So Trump doesn't really have any organized opposition anymore. I mean, a young 32-year-old guy who's a communist who wants to run for mayor of New York, Gavin Newsom, and that's his opposition. I think the opposition's faded away, which is great.
Yeah. KT, I did enjoy our time. It was funny. I talked to a cabinet level person the other day who said, there's things, both sides, this guys in the second term. Yeah. I think it's a much different place. They're getting a lot done, but like we had the opportunity to break a lot of glass and do a lot of things with this president for the first time. And so it's amazing sometimes to have conversations with people like you and to remember, I think the history that we made together and how different the world is now because of it.
And if you look at all the initiatives that they're now being able to achieve, they were all made, those decisions were made in the first couple of weeks and months of the first term of the first presidency.
Yeah. Yeah. KT McFarland, thanks for your service to our country, for continuing to come back, and obviously for this amazing perspective that you're bringing to the events today. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Thank you for such a thoughtful conversation. I appreciate it.
You bet. All right. What a great conversation with KT. She was the Deputy National Security Advisor, as I said. And I didn't have time to get to this. I don't know that it was, but there was, we was talking about like being ready to fight. And it's not just what we're doing abroad, but it's like making sure that our military is strong. And there is this cool thing that happened yesterday with Bobby Kennedy and Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of Defense. They teamed up for the Pete and Bobby Challenge. Let me play you a clip.
All right, here we are in the bowels of the Pentagon for the Pete and Bobby Challenge. I think this was your idea, so I blame you. But it's all about Make America Healthy Again. We're going to be fit, not fat. We want recruits that are ready to go and challenge. What are we doing today, Bobby?
Well, Pete and I are going to do our part, encourage American youth to do this challenge. And the challenge is to do 100 push-ups and 50 pull-ups in any order you want in under 10 minutes.
So 5 minutes is the top standard that we want to meet.
You're not going to be able to do that.
All right, there you have it. The Pete and Bobby Challenge. Hegseth squeaking out by about a 20-second win. I can do the push-ups. I can. The pull-ups, not going to happen. I'm telling you, not going to happen. But it's amazing to see them do this and inspire so many people to get back in shape and get fit. By the way, Bobby Kennedy, the guy just works out like jeans and a T-shirt, and then he's bulking out. It's amazing. One little fun clip, though, to end the show. There was this incident, as most of you guys know, I spend the summer in Rhode Island. That's where I grew up. But there is a Karen, actually her name's not Karen, but she's an assistant attorney general in the state of Rhode Island, a Democrat. I want to show you what happens when you get drunk in Newport and don't leave the premises. Take a look.
Anything we can do. Yeah. Trespass, yeah. I just need
trespass. Got to know.
Yeah, please. It's the only way.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Do we want to chat?
I know that your protocol is.
So you're trespass, so we got to leave now. Unless you want to be in there.
We're not trespassing. You haven't notified us that we're trespassing.
What did I just say to you? You're
You're
trespassing.
number
Let's
one.
go.
Number one.
I don't
Number
want
two.
to arrest you guys.
You're not going to arrest us. Number two
So let's
is
leave.
that
We gotta go. We
your
gotta go.
protocol
Let's
is
go. Let's go.
calm down for 1 second. Is if we ask you to turn the body
I don't
cam
want
off.
to deal with this. Let's
Okay.
go.
No, no. I understand you don't want to deal with it, but the
let's go.
protocol
Wait,
is,
wait,
and your
can you-
protocol
can
is
you
if I
relax?
ask you to turn off the body cam, you have to turn it off, and that's your protocol.
She's a f***ing lawyer, so she knows.
Well, that's lawyer stuff, so that's not true. So we gotta go.
No, it is. That's law.
I'm an
What's she
AG.
saying?
I'm an AG.
Good for you. I don't give a shit. Let's go. We're going. Let's go.
Excuse.
We're leaving.
Please don't.
We're leaving.
Please don't put your hands on us.
Can you get your children out of here? Like, I don't know why.
I'm sorry. What?
Let's go.
No.
Let's go. Come on, you're wasting so much time. They're two full-grown women and mothers of children. All right.
You're just being detained. You're just being detained.
I'm an AG. I'm an AG. I'm an AG. What are you?
What's wrong with you?
What
What's
are
wrong
you
with you?
probable cause to detain me for?
You're being detained because you're not leaving.
Because I'm what? You have.
Can you relax? Sir, she's not doing anything wrong.
AG.
She's not leaving.
I'm an AG.
She's an AG. Buddy, you're not. She's not being arrested. Let's go.
I'm not being arrested. You're putting me in cuffs. I'm not being
Okay,
arrested.
do you have any weapons on you?
No. I'm an AG.
Her badge.
All right. You get the point there. She's an AG. She's an assistant attorney general. Her name, by the way, Devin Flanagan. That's how Democrats act. They have a badge. They're important. It doesn't matter that they're trespassing or intoxicated in public and asked to leave and choose not to. That's your Democratic Party for you right there. Let's see if she faces any consequences, Devin Flanagan. By the way, I put the whole video on my social media. It doesn't get better from there. Let's just put it that way. Her friend, a little bit more belligerent. They've both been booked in Newport, Rhode Island, pending a court case. Anyway, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow. I have a brand new column out today at SeanSpicer.com. Check it out because it's about all this national security stuff. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.